Hi, my name is Paul Arnold and I'm a qualified psychotherapist and also a trained coach. And today's session is going to be about letting go. And I find this a fascinating subject because I can't tell you the number of people I talk to who fundamentally struggle with letting go. Now, I'm going to talk some theory, I'm going to give you some strategies, and a lot of those strategies are going to be behavioral and cognitive, but I actually think, this is where psychotherapy comes into its own, because a lot of what lies behind the letting go is a much deeper, richer, emotionally, sort of vector of different factors. And it's the unpicking about it. Because letting go for me is a bit like if ever you try to uproot a tree. You think you got it, you chopped away that root and it still doesn't come out. You need to chop away that. And that's what it is. There's a complexity that we really need to understand and dig into. And very often is deeply emotionally driven. It's not the rationality. There's a logic they already know. There's a rationality that basically is always trumped by emotionality. And to be fair, that's where psychotherapy works best. It works best at the emotional space in helping to unlock that stuff. So let's go and explore some about letting go. You know what? We hold on to so much stuff. We've all watched those programs of people who hoard stuff. They hold on to things, or people who hold on to grudges. They remember things you said from 20 years ago, and often people are in relationships that reality have run past their sell-by date, but you find it really difficult to let go. And I think I want to, at this point, focus more upon relationship, because I think that is the most powerful space. And if we can learn to how to unlock that, then some of the other ones are much easier to go and deal with. Why is it so difficult to let go of relationships? Because you know what? It's fundamentally within our DNA. We are relationally driven. The very first thing when we come out of our mother is to seek the breast. So we are drawn to connection. And all the great work upon, attachment theory talks about how that very earliest relationship with our good enough mother or less good enough mother absolutely creates our patterns of relationship as we go on in life. So if you've got a good enough mother who's given you all the affect regulation, a posh word for emotional regulation, then we feel safe, we feel secure. And maybe 50% of people are in that safe place, and they go out into other relationships and they feel okay and they feel safe in that relational space. But then we then have about 25% who have primarily it is a mother, but obviously it could be another caregiver, it could be a father, it could be a grandmother or whatever, who basically don't give them that level of security. And the emotional overwhelm is so strong that basically what they learn at that very young age, we're talking pre-verbal stage, is they learn how to keep themselves safe, and they detach, and they basically get into this sort of avoidant dismissing space where they sort of close down their emotions. They become very much sort of, I can do this all by myself. And you see that type in relationships where they don't share too much, they're emotionally cut off, they're quite distant, and they're very difficult to get through. Now, there's another group of people, about 20%, who basically, because that mother wasn't as well, attuned to the child, also feels that their needs are unmet. And rather than closing down, they go forward. So if, avoidant is about stepping back, these ambivalent, preoccupied, come forward. They seek the relationship, they come into the relationship, and they become quite needy, quite clingy. So actually in that sense, the letting go is very difficult for these type of people, because actually who do they become when they let go of that stuff? And we know that, there's another group, which is 5%, which are disorganized, and they're a bit like when the person they love the most give them hurt, and they don't really, and they just sort of, they're a little bit more what we call disorganized. But let's not worry too much, about them, because the other groups make up the vast majority. But therefore, what we often do is we often recreate the same relationship again in our future relationships. We often seek the mother we didn't have, and we try to sort of have that relationship again, because it's a known space. And what we want to do is to almost recreate it to maybe have a better chance of it second time round. And we just know how to be in that space. But very often in these relationships, we get so locked in with another person because actually they make us whole. They become our yin to our yang. They become, this space that we didn't have. And I think that can actually potentially cause problems in a relationship, because we become too dependent, too needy. And we talk about codependency in that space. And let's be quite frank, other people can create that within us. So in other words, if someone is very needy, they may make you feel as if you really are really important to them. And that fills us with a sense of sort of, as we often talk, this rescuer pride. Or they can push you into being feeling guilty. You can't leave me. If you leave me, I'm just gonna, do disastrous things. So we get trapped into these relationships and we daren't move out of them. So some strategies is, there's something about, one of the big things is we live in what I call magical thinking. Oh, the relationship will sort itself out. We can deal with this stuff, it's not that bad. And I think actually the reality is we've got to say, well, what is the reality? And maybe the reality is it isn't as bad, but we've got to face the truth. Because only when we're staring at the truth, as brutal and as cold as it is, can we do something about it. And then I think it's really important that what we do is to identify, why are we not letting go? We're not letting go because fundamentally we don't want to let go, because somehow that relationship is still serving us. And until you can face that, it's not all black and white. Very rarely in life is it all bad, all good. If you look at the process of change, it's very interesting about that stuff. I won't go into that for now. But we've got to really look at it. How is staying here serving me more than leaving? Because right now that's a reality. It's serving you more, because if you were able to reduce it down and increase the other, then you'd be moving out of that relationship, but you don't. And I think you've also got to look at, what are the fears? What do you fear is going to happen? How would the other person cope? How will society, how will family, how will friends react to you? Will you be ostracized? Have you got fears about financial? Let's be quite frank, that can be a very real concern. And then I think what we've got to do, we've then got to reshape the meaning of this stuff. What does this relationship really mean? What is the new meaning we need to put onto it? What is the new meaning we need to put on the future? Who do we become when we are no longer in partnership with that other person? And that's what we've got to look at. And I think one of the other things we need to do is look at, what are the values? If we're really trying to challenge this, it's what are my values? And I've done a whole section about values. What are my values? And how does this person help meet my values or not? And I think then we can then start seeing what that relationship is about and whether that's right or wrong. I'm not here to destroy relationships. I think actually if you can make it work. But I also want to feel why do we not let go? And I think, it's very difficult to let go unless we've got something else we can cling on to, in that way I talk about. So in other words, actually one of the ways is actually we need to fill the space, because it will create a void. Well, maybe we need to get new friendships. Maybe we need to sort of invest in for old friendships again. But you know, there's something about we need to replace the void and find something to fill in. Maybe it's just some activity. Doesn't matter. So in terms of how psychotherapy can help, I think one of the fundamental things is psychotherapy helps build your own inner core strength of self, and to then realize that you don't need the other person. You may want the other person, but you don't need them, and that you can cope without them. And likewise, they can cope without you. We are much more resilient as beings, you know, than we ever give ourselves credit to. And to sort of misquote the sort of L'Oreal campaign, because you're worth it. We've got to put ourselves and build our own self-esteem to think, are we worth being in this relationship or not? Anyway, I hope that helps.